Oh, sorry, where's that came from? Community councils for the Public Services Board, please. And so far, we've had a volunteer who is Ian Perry, and I'm waiting for him to be seconded or to receive any other nominations, please. And if you'd like to put your hand up, right, Councillor Wilson.
I could hear you earlier, but you couldn't hear me. Yeah, I'll second that. That's fine.
I was wondering as well, Chair, whether or not we may wish to, as you originally suggested, of hearing the report at the next meeting, just because obviously we do have a number of the town and community councils who are not present.
Yes.
I just wondered whether that you may, I know
whether we should push this over to October when we've got a full attendance.
Yes, Chair, I think that would be my suggestion, if that would be okay with yourselves.
Right, and I think what we need to do is we need to circulate this again to the town and community clerks, council clerks, so that they are able to put in a nomination, so that we're not having to just take volunteers off the floor at the time, so we can make sure that the community councils are properly represented. So that's what we're going to do. Right, Councillor Wilson, your hand is still up.
Yeah, that was basically, Chair, that was my sort of observation or question. I mean, how long ago did we know that the previous councillor couldn't do this? And it would have been helpful to let us know in advance, which you've now covered. I think it's a lesson learned. I mean, to ask people on the day to volunteer or to be put forward. And also, how often does the Public Services Work Board meet? Does it meet online? Does it meet in person? How does it operate? That's another bit of useful information, I think. So when councillors are considering it, they at least know what they're committing themselves to.
Okay, I'm going to defer to Rob Thomas here.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of Public Services Board, very, very quickly, it's a legal requirement that every local authority administers a Public Service Board. As the name suggests, it involves a coming together of all public organisations. So in the Vale, you would have the Cardiff and Vale Health Board, you'd have the Fire Service, you'd have South Wales Police, you'd have Natural Resources Wales. You'd also have other private and public partners from the area in question. So in the Vale of Glamorgan, a typical partner would be Cardiff and Vale College, for example. And the aim of a Public Service Board is to work together in partnership for the greater good of the communities and residents of the Vale, integrate services, join up services and work together on a well-being plan that a Public Service Board has to produce. Inevitably, the Vale Council administers the board. It services the board in terms of the paperwork, the agendas, and it meets as a rule every 2 months. And it's sorry that your last question is, at the moment, they're all online, all totally online. But there will be occasions where the PSB will come together in person. For example, if they do a single item issue or a workshop type event, they will come together in person. It's beneficial because it enables the Vale Council and other public sector partners, including a town or community council representative, to have oversight of what's happening in the area and how we can deliver services for the common good in an integrated way. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into what it does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And can I add to that, please, that we would, if you, anyone who goes on to the Public Service Board from this committee, we would expect to see the agenda in advance so that we can, so that town and community councils can raise matters to be brought forward by that delegate. And we would expect that delegate to provide us with a report, either written or a verbal update at the next meeting subsequent to the Public Service Board. Because I think in the past it hasn't always been made clear to us what exactly has gone on. Councillor Perry.
Yeah, just quick. When is the next meeting
Of
the Public Service Board?
I don't know. I'm not privy to that.
Yeah, because I thought that Tom Bowering mentioned. Rob's just put his hand up.
Right, Rob Thomas.
Yeah, I'm not putting my camera on because I'm busy scrolling through my diary. It is this month. I think it's the 9th of July, so in a week and a day's time.
Are we not going to send anybody, or can we just send somebody for that one-off meeting? Or is it not worth sending someone just for one meeting?
Chair, through you, if you're happy, I would suggest the approach that we send some more information out in advance of the next meeting, wait for fuller attendance, probably better off using that strategy than trying to force the issue now and have somebody ready in a week's time, because I think we're looking for a representative to be available for more than just the next meeting. So that would be my advice.
Right, thank you very much for that. So the next meeting of the Community Liaison Committee is in October, isn't it, Amy?
That's correct, Chair. Yes, the 16th.
Thank you. So we have got, I mean, Amy will act with dispatch as she always does. So I imagine that the information about needing that nomination can go out and probably hit both the July and the September meetings of the Town and Community Council. So there is an opportunity for all of the Town and Community Councils to have their views represented in the form of the delegate. So we're going to leave that, and Amy will send out to all of the committee their community and town council clerks for nominations. Okay, thank you very much. Can we move on now then, please, to item 7, which is the Democracy and Boundary Commission, which is the Electoral Arrangements Review. And we have a stellar cast here who are presenting it to us. We have Rob Thomas, and I think Vicky Davidson is on the call as well, and possibly someone from the Electoral Arrangements Office. So I'm going to hand over to Rob.
Yeah, I'll be quite brief, Chair, because members will be aware that we've just undertaken a community review of the Vale of Glamorgan. So the community review was the building blocks of the makeup of the town and community councils. The Minister from Welsh Government has recently accepted the recommendations of that review, and work will be in progress between now and the next local government election in May 2027 to put in place that review. After the community review, it's important that the Boundary Commission follows this up with a wider electoral review, and that's a review of the Vale of Glamorgan council wards that make up the Vale. And a lot of what is going to be suggested by the Boundary Commission follows on from that community review, because it would be nonsensical to have a community review where new wards are being created, for example, and I'll give you 2 examples straight away: Barry Waterfront in Barry and the Cosmoston ward in Surrey/Penarth for the electoral review to then ignore that. So the report goes into some detail about the issues that the Boundary Commission will look at. In particular, they will look at the makeup of the Vale in terms of the number of councils, the number of councillors, and they will look at the population density and the sparsity across each ward as it currently exists. That data is set out in paragraph 1.5 of the report. I won't go through it all, other than to suggest that the allocation for the Vale of Glamorgan Council electoral area, after all that data is considered, comes to a total of 59. Now, the current number of councillors for the Vale ward is at 54. We know that 2 new wards have been created, or potentially created, in the waterfront area and in Cosmoston Penarth. So that would account for an increase in the number of councillors in the Vale. But the key issue that that the Boundary Commission will look at is the percentage, or the factor of population compared to members in each area. And paragraph 2.1 onwards sets out the observations that we're making at the start. Now, these are just observations, they're not recommendations. So in a sense, if you look at the data and if you look at what is being recommended as being areas of focus for the Boundary Commission, they amount to the Barry Waterfront ward, the Cosmoston ward in Penarth, the Devon ward, and they've also said that they would be interested in looking at Wenvo and also Llandow wards. Now that's because if you look at Wenvo and you look at Llandow, the population density to members is quite high. So in essence, what is going to be recommended, there'll be a new waterfront ward of 2 members in Barry. There's a debate to be had about whether the Cosmoston ward should be a freestanding ward or whether it should be merged with the Plymouth ward in Penarth. If it is merged with the Plymouth ward, it would stay as a Cosmoston ward at community level or town council level, but it would create a bigger building block of a bigger Plymouth ward for the electoral level at principal council. There's a suggestion that the Dyfan ward in Barry would have an additional member because of the population density. And there's a suggestion that Wenvo, the population density is too high for just 1 member. So there would be a debate around whether that ward should be combined with a neighbouring ward. And that is dealt with in paragraph 2.4. And then likewise in the Western Vale, there's a suggestion that the Llandow ward there's too many people in the Llandow ward for 1 member, so there would be a piece of work done by the Boundary Commission about how they would get across that issue. As I say, these are just observations at the moment. They're the likely areas that the Boundary Commission would look at. It's worth saying that the individual town and community councils, and indeed any individual member from any town and community council, can make representations directly to the Boundary Commission in the same way as any councillor from the Vale of Glamorgan Council could do so, and in the same way as any political group could do so. This represents the first stage. After this stage, the Boundary Commission will then publish their thoughts and suggestions, at which time that report and those suggestions would come back again before this committee. So this really is kickstarting that process. The aim would be that this process and the community review that I've already mentioned at the start of my introduction to this report would both then be put into place before the next local government election. So that's where we're at, Chair, if that's helpful.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Right, do people have comments that they'd like to make, please? Can you put your hands up? No comments? Councillor Summers.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Rob, for the report. It's most useful. I'm sure those of us from the town and community councils will appreciate why at this early stage that you're focusing on the 5 areas of obvious concern that have been highlighted by the Commission. But I think we'd also note that I think it's in para 2.6 of your report, you recognise, and you mentioned it again this evening, that obviously there may be areas that can be raised by town community councils and individual councillors beyond that. Pencline Community Council, and I'm sure many other TCCs represented, would consider that it's very important that any matters which could improve effective, accountable representation across all our electorates are reviewed at this stage, and the particular issues and measures which might not be immediately apparent just from looking at the councillor numbers and ratios, which were reflected in your report, are brought to the attention of the commissioners and the principal council as soon as possible, to make sure that they are looked at, and we don't just look at it in case of numbers and ratios. As the chair and the leader of the council are aware, Pencline Council has already submitted some suggestions to the Commission in regard to the wider Cowbridge ward. which don't affect impact on the number of councillors or the ratios to the electorate, but we do believe that they would significantly improve the accountability of councillors to the electorate. So I would ask the committee to urge the council and its officials that when they consider and submitting responses to the commission, that they ensure that it's not simply an exercise in balancing numbers and ratios, but the full consideration is given to measures and proposals which go to what must surely be the core objectives of the review, which is to ensure effective, efficient and accountable representation for all the areas and the communities served by the Vale Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I did see another hand up, but it appears to have gone down again. Does anybody else have a comment that they'd like to make, please? Just check. No? Rob Thomas.
Yeah, I'll just come back to that. Thank you, Councillor Summers. And I'm aware you have written to the leader about this as well, because ultimately the council will be making observations back to the Boundary Commission. And you are right, we need to look at every area in the Vale, not just the ones that have been brought to our attention by the Boundary Commission. The reason those are flagged up in the report is for that reason alone, really, that we know that the Boundary Commission are going to be focusing on those areas because they're the areas that are identified in one of the appendices on the map in the appendix that suggests those are the areas that need a bit of attention. That's to say, you know your local areas, you know how governance works and democracy works in those local areas. So if you've got any strength of feeling, now is the right time to raise it with the Boundary Commission. And we'll note it here tonight that you've made those comments, and we'll make sure that those comments are forwarded on to the Boundary Commission separately by this council as well. That helps. And just to reiterate that the business end of this comes at the next stage, really. So this is the opportunity that town and community councils and indeed the Vale Council has to make their initial observations. The business end, as I say, will be when we receive the recommendations of the Boundary Commission, where everybody will be able to make comments again. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else who would like to make a comment, please? No? I mean, obviously, this is something that's going to be discussed by the relevant town and community councils. So I would expect something to come back to the meeting in October. Okay, if there's nothing else that anybody wants to bring up on that point, please. I don't think that we've been apprised of any other business, Amy.
That's correct, Chair. No other business.
Right, okay. Thank everybody for their attendance this evening. Despite the technical difficulties, we've managed to get through to the end of it. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.